In today's video, I'm going to be talking about quilting a baby quilt. Hi, I'm Kim Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and a few videos ago I showed you how to make this really cute little baby quilt using a charm pack. Now, if you haven't seen that video, not to worry, there's a link up above or in the description below, and you can go and see how to make this quilt using a charm pack and some yardage. But how do we quilt it? Okay, so before I get into that, by the way, hang around to the end of the video because I'm going to talk to you about creating a flange for any quilt, really. Okay, so let's talk about what the considerations are when you're quilting a baby quilt. Okay, usually, and take this with a grain of salt, usually you are not creating an heirloom piece, okay? You're usually creating a blanket of love, if you will, that the baby is going to, cuddle up with, that will probably need to be washed frequently. And the point of the quilting is always to keep the quilt sandwich, the top, batting, and backing, together. Okay, so when we're talking about quilting it, you want something that can be done fairly quickly, not super dense, because you want to keep that quilt pliable and soft, right? You don't want to have a real stiff baby quilt. It's not very comfortable to cuddle up in. So I have some different ideas for you today. And before we get into that, I want to say a big thank you to my Patchwork Pals. Those are members of my Patchwork Pals YouTube channel membership, and they get special perks for paying a monthly fee. So they get early access to videos, they have priority in the comments, and they get lots of other fun perks. They are a great support for the Chatterbox Quilts YouTube channel. And if you would like to support my channel and get all those fun perks, you can join us too. Just click on the join button you'll find below any of my videos. You'll get all the details. You could even join us today. Now let's get back and talk about different motifs you could use on a baby quilt. One of the easiest things to do with a baby quilt is to quilt loops across it. So the loops are joined by kind of a curvy line. They're really just circles joined with a curvy line. And you can create them as large or as small as you want. And there's also lots of different variations with loops. You can have a loop within a loop, for example. And it's a continuous design, so it goes across the quilt very quickly. And it is very appropriate for a baby quilt. Now you could change up the loops a little bit and add something extra into them, and that would be stars. You remember making those stars when you were a kid? They're a continuous design as well, so you could have a few loops and then a star, a few more loops and a star. Again, you can vary the size of the loops and the stars to go across the quilt quickly. A more traditional design you can use is continuous curves, and this quilt is perfect for that type of quilting because you can use the seams in the quilt to make those continuous curves. No marking is required. Another quick way to quilt this type of quilt is using wavy lines, and you can either do this by free motion quilting it, or you could use, if you have one, the serpentine stitch on your sewing machine. So some sewing machines will have this type of decorative stitch on them, and again, it's very quick to do that on this type of quilt. And again, the seams in the quilt can help you. You can go across the seams and then maybe inside the block and then across the next seam, and that gives you perfect spacing for those wavy lines. Something else that's fun to add to a quilt like this is flower swirls. What I really like about this design is, again, you can make it as large or small as you want, and because you echo around the center swirl to create the petals, you can echo around as many times as you want to create as large a flower as you want. Then you can join them with curved lines. You could even join them with loops if you wanted to. Again, very quick way to quilt a baby quilt. So those are just a few suggestions for the types of motifs you could use for a baby quilt. But I did say at the beginning of the video that I was going to talk to you about the flange. So in this quilt, there is this flange, which is kind of a fun 3D effect to put on it. How do you make a flange? It's very simple. First, you need to figure out how wide do you want your flange to be. So in this case, I have a flange that's about 1 inch in width. So you take your width that you want to have at the end, so your finished width, if you will, and you're going to multiply that times 2, because this is actually a piece of fabric folded in half, and then you're going to add half an inch for your seam allowances. So for my 1 inch flange, for example, I cut a piece 2.5 inches, folded it in half and pressed it, and then I stitched it along just like you would a border on the sides of my quilt with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, okay? I want it to go down there, but I'm going to be adding the border on top of it, so I don't want that seam that I have stitched down to show. That's why I'm doing it at a narrower seam allowance. Once you've done the two sides, then you would just do the top and bottom. So it's just like adding a regular border that you would just have, you know, 2 on the side and 2 on the top. Very similar. Some people will think that a flange adds extra width or length to their quilt, and that is not true. The flange adds absolutely nothing extra to your quilt except for this fun 3D little piece to it. And when you are quilting and you have a flange on your quilt, you want to make sure that you pin it back out of the way so that the quilting doesn't get caught in it, right? So you can just kind of fold it back and pin it, and just be a little careful at the corners because it's a little difficult to fold it back all the way. So those are some ideas for how to quilt your baby quilt. And if you're wondering how to do some of those different designs I mentioned, don't worry, I've got you covered. Check out this video, which gives you all the helpful information that you'll need. For more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.